Greetings, humans, and welcome to Lead Human. I'm Tim Spengler, along with my co-host, the futurist and prolific author, Mr. Jack Myers. And together each week in about 30 minutes or so, we aim to prove that although data and dashboards and AI are certainly important, that the real competitive advantage in business today is less about managing the machine and more about unleashing the human potential. And this is Lead Human. Jack, tell us about our guest today.
Tim, Lindsay Jurist-Rosner was in the midst of a really strong career at Microsoft in marketing with our mutual colleague, Dave Morgan at Simul Media, and also a caregiver for her mother. And she decided to really pivot her career and found Wellthy, W-E-L-L-T-H-Y, with an emphasis on wellness and the caregiving needs that she felt weren't satisfied to support her in her life or her mother or her family. And in 2014, she founded Wellthy and has built an incredibly successful organization that's supporting thousands, if not millions of people now globally with Wellthy. It got me thinking about caregiving. And in our model, and what we talk about at Lead Human with leadership, how do the caregiving models that she's learning through a caregiving model that was more health related, but how do we apply that in business? What are the realities that carry across both the caregiving as a family caregiver, but also caregiving as a leader? Any thoughts on that?
Well, yes, because my company's tagline when I was head of initiative was care, point of view, and win. So I don't know if you remember that, but literally I thought the most important single word was care. So I'm right with you. I thought that was a care both internally as a leader, but it was also care for the clients that you serve. So I thought it was both, and I wanted everyone to embrace that was our first core value. And it's been played back to me over years by former clients and other people. So I am right with you that I think that's a lot of it. If you do, people, and the other thing I'll say is, and people know internally or externally, they know if you care or you don't care. You can fake a lot of things. It's hard to fake caring. So I love the word.
So the lessons we can learn from Lindsay in our conversation extend to everyone who's in an organization, in a family, or every part of leadership.
Well, it's a great point. And I think we always like to explore both working in big corporations, but also working in startups. She did both, and she had the gumption to solve a problem that she was experiencing and start something. So we're going to learn about that aspect.
Especially today when so many people want to be an entrepreneur or are being forced to become an entrepreneur just by the realities of the workplace today. Exactly. So we're looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. All right, let's bring on Lindsay. Lindsay, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Awesome.
Lindsay, I'm so grateful that you are there, and I am also regretful that I am not able to be there in person, but I look forward to you and I catching up soon in person.
I would love that. Let's do it, Jack.
He's sitting in some above 90-degree weather in Tucson, Arizona, while the wind chill here is in the 20s. But anyway.
We won't think about that.
Anyway. First question we like to ask every guest.
Please.
And it's kind of a grounding question. And it's less about what you do, but more about who you are.
Okay.
Lead Human, we want to start with the human. So tell us, Lindsay, who are you and what's it like to be you?
Ooh, I love the question. The answer is just totally, you're not going to like this, but it's actually totally related to what I do too.
That's probably perfect.
Probably perfect. I'm a caregiver. That's totally my identity.
Would you have answered it that way at 18 if I asked you that, or 25? Like literally?
I probably wouldn't at that age, but probably my 30s.
Okay,
I started to kind of tune into my role. Back then, it was the role I played in the life of my mom. My mom was sick for a very long time, and I took care of her. But now I have a big blended family and no shortage of care challenges with other loved ones. And so I do feel like my days and my years are just spent kind of in various caregiving roles.
So you were in marketing.
Yes.
In the media industry,
Correct.
Microsoft, then Advanced TV, Simon Media, and then just a pivot to a caregiver company.
Yeah.
What was that? Is there we could spend the whole half hour just on that, but what was there a kernel of a moment where like something went off in your head that said, I'm going to do this instead?
I started my career in media. I was working for a magazine called The Atlantic after college, and I went there because I admired the new owner of the magazine, and then kind of fell into media, and so continued my role there, continued my career there, and went to Microsoft after business school, and went to work for Dave Morgan at Simon Media after Microsoft, and. For me, it was just, kind of what I sort of started to fall into, and then what my network and what I learned to love to do. But I tell people the real job I played outside of that professional role was the role I played in the life of my mom. And it was as many hours, as stressful, as time-consuming. Like, it was a full-time second job. And so even though my career was in media, I had almost 3 decades of experience caregiving for my mom. So I do feel like that was like.
Was there like a moment that you said, I'm going to double down and do this full time for other people?
There wasn't a moment. I bought the domain name wellthy.com in 2009. I didn't start the company until 2014. It was like I had this thing inside me. I wanted to go solve this problem for families. I didn't have the guts to go do it for a long time. I went to work for Dave Morgan. I mean, I almost viewed it as an apprenticeship. Dave had this phenomenal reputation in the market, and I wanted to see what it looked like to be a serial successful entrepreneur. Right. And then I was working for him for a couple of years. And then there was a moment working for Dave where I thought to myself, I can do what he's doing. I get it. I see it. Being up and like it demystified, being a CEO and an entrepreneur, and it built up my confidence. And I was ready to go do it. And then this is like totally not something I talk about, but the other thing is,
we won't tell anybody.
Okay, nobody will find out. but honestly, I had a dear friend who bought a building in New York, and he was like, Lindsay, do you want to? He was like converting it to condos or rentals or one way, going back and forth. And he was like, do you want to just live there? I won't start construction for like a year. You could live there rent free. And I was like, this is my moment to start a company, because the major kind of personal expense I had was rent. And I was like, okay, if I can put my rent money into building my company, this is go time. And so that was also motivating.
Jack, that entrepreneurial, I'm trying to solve a problem. I want to solve a problem is a common, we've heard this before. And Lindsay's another one of those examples.
So Lindsay, you and I first met when you were at Simon Media. And I remember when you made the decision to leave and describe to me what you were planning on doing. I didn't know the real estate story. That's a great one. Yeah. But as you look at Wellthy, and most of our audience won't be familiar with what it is, can you kind of share the concept, but more importantly, share it through the vision of leadership and what you've learned about leadership as you've transferred from the business world in media to a very different type of business of caregiving?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so the company I founded, Wellthy, is in the business of helping people with care. The early observation I had in caring for my mom was that the medical side of her care was very straightforward. She had doctors and they prescribed medicine. And if she had an issue, there was a hospitalization. The medical side of it was very straightforward. But the medical side was a very small portion of the day-to-day care that was we thought about for my mom. Maybe 5% of our time and energy was on the medical component. The rest of it was the kind of non-clinical aspects of care. And this is consistent. It's not just, for an aging parent. In my case, my mom had MS. We see this across any type of chronic condition, aging-related care need. We see it for kiddos with complex care needs. What happens is the family takes on about 90% of the care of that loved one, typically. And that's all of the stuff that happens in the home or in a non-clinical setting. It's things like day-to-day activities, depending on the ability of the care recipient. It could be dressing and bathing and mobility support. Could be things like medication management and prescription support or helping with drugs. It could be things like negotiating or dealing with the insurance company. All of those things are just massively time-consuming. And what I learned in the early days of researching the space and just through my personal experiences, there's no infrastructure to help families. And so we had this idea of what if we could provide, it's almost analogous to how you might work with a financial advisor, right? It's the person who becomes your partner. It's the expert, but they're also a doer. They can go get things done for you. And they're really managing your finances. We thought, how do we provide that same level of service and support to families with complex care to help navigate care, access the right care, help them with decision support, and then a key piece is affordability. How do you pay for the cost of care? So we built Wellthy, focused on that. Immediately, aging-related care became our number one use case, complex kiddos, number two use case. We've scaled and expanded scope a lot. We're now into backup care and all these other areas, but that was the kind of early genesis. And then from a leadership perspective, I'll tell you, Jack, personally as a leader prior to building Wellthy, care was such a major part of my story, and yet I barely shared it. It was like this hidden part of myself. I didn't want to burden people. It wasn't that fun to talk about. I didn't want to put my stresses and worries on other people, but it impacted how I showed up. It impacted my ability. It impacted where I could work. I would have to fly home to support my mom. I was kind of, always a little distracted if she was going through something. All these kind of emotions that were just a major part of my leadership journey.
Well, that's a perfect segue, Lindsay. You use the word infrastructure, and so much as we move further and deeper into a world led by AI, methods, systems, infrastructure become such an important part of leadership. But yet in your world and in the world of most business leaders going forward, empathy is going to play a more important role, the human part of leadership, as technology, data becomes more and more dominant, but also very commoditized. So talk about, if you will, what you've learned about how to integrate empathy into the systems, into the infrastructure, into the methods that you build.
Yeah, I think it's such a good question. I think this is like total future of work type topic, right? Like the roles of the future, especially kind of in the next, call it 2 to 5 years, as AI and technology take on more of the kind of mundane or kind of rote tasks. The tasks or the work that's left is the work that requires empathy or social skills, those types of things. So yeah, I think, and by the way, the people who are the best fit for those roles are caregivers. That's the irony of it. People who are attuned to others, able to take care of others are also great in manager roles. They're great for a lot of roles as we think about the future of work. By the way, Joe Fuller at Harvard Business School has done phenomenal work on this topic. But yeah, in terms of my own leadership and kind of what we see with the leaders we support, it's, attempting to destigmatize the family care topics, that it can be part of the, just the dialogue in kind of the workplace in a little bit more, comfortable of a way, right? So what does that look like? For a leader to truly, have a high performing team and make sure all individuals are showing up and able to be their best self, they have to understand what's holding that individual back potentially. And if that individual is, juggling 2 kids under 2, I can promise you that employee is not showing up as their best self. If that employee just found out their parent had a fall or a new diagnosis, they're worried about their employees, their family's well-being, I can promise you that employee won't show up as their best self. And the more that leaders are able to truly help that employee think about how to manage both their professional work, the tasks on their plate, the work that has to get done, but also in the context of everything they're dealing with at home, is, I think, the future of like profound performance and productivity and also just empathetic leadership.
So you're saying that's what leadership has in common, because I was going to kind of go the same place where Jack just was.
Yeah.
That's what leadership has in common when we're managing people in the advertising marketing ecosystem or in the healthcare ecosystem.
Anywhere.
On the people side of managing people, this is a key aspect of understanding them to get the best help. I guess helping them to be their best selves.
Helping them to be their best selves, which serves the business and serves the work, right? If you're trying to understand how to kind of unlock the potential of, a person on your team, you gotta understand the full picture.
Okay, so you said you haven't seen any of these episodes. The reason I'm saying that is because our friggin' tagline is unleashing the human potential.
There you go.
You didn't even know that.
There you go.
That wasn't even scripted. I want everyone to know.
That.
We didn't pay her $20 to say that. That's just what you think.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're gonna see. We won't just do the art cards for you. That's literally what it is.
Nice.
All right. And I love Jack asked the man and machine combo conversation kind of question. So those are two of the ones I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Here's the next one I was going to ask.
Please.
So you manage, how many people in your company?
We're at about 300,
right.
Maybe a little bit over globally. So most folks are in the U.S., and then we do have some colleagues outside of the U.S.
Okay, right. So big enough team to where you don't know everybody. You're probably close. I mean, but so what are some of the skill sets that you've learned? If we said 10 years ago, you're going to be able to do this, this, and this, you'd be like, I don't think so. Like, what are some of these skill sets that you stretched to now, I can do that. I have that as a skill if I need it.
Yeah.
Any of those come to mind, being a CEO of 300 people?
It's funny, like all of the skill sets I needed were probably in the earliest days of the company. I feel like I do so much less now because I just have like, a great leadership team.
You said, hold on, I'm going to stop you. You do so much less, but you have as many hours.
I do.
So when you say do less,
I probably do work similar hours, but the work is more focused on certain things. I'm external a lot. I do a lot on the sales side, a lot with our clients. But in the early days of the business, you wear a lot of hats. You know, like I was like literally like, closing out our books monthly, on the accounting side.
Not trained to be an accountant.
No.
But, okay, now I'm doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, right, there's one. Yeah. Oh, God, I don't even want to know
Dealing
about that.
with, various member support things. So, I mean, I think I developed a ton of, like, ability to do, like, very okay on a lot of things in the early days.
Accounting, give us some other ones that you like, just for people who are thinking about leadership and entrepreneurship, because a lot of people listening are thinking, should I go that way? Should I do it as a side hustle? What are some of these skill sets going in you didn't think you never thought you'd have to do, but can do and master it? Accounting's one. Give us two more.
Yeah, and like these were things I knew enough to be dangerous, but like we definitely needed to bring real like focused talent and experts in. But I did all the finance, and so all the fundraise activities, all the board prep in the early days, supporting a lot of the operational kind of strategy and tactics and thinking through those pieces. Just a lot of like just in the weeds that I'm not in the weeds anymore.
Good examples. You had to do all those things, and if you failed at them, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Exactly. Awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Jack.
Yeah.
In that context, Lindsay, and that's really great. And the fact that you had to learn a lot of the tools to make sure your organization, your company is profitable, that to look at the efficiency, the accounting, the more traditional roles of leadership. But one thing that's not often taught to leaders is how do you navigate and manage building emotional strength, which is going to be more and more important, especially as you describe, you have to balance that understanding of what people bring into the job from their out of work life. So how do you teach your teams and those many people who are caregivers and leaders today, how do you manage helping people relieve the emotional weight that they carry?
Relieve our like colleagues and our leaders of the emotional weight. I mean, I think you learn resilience. I think it's like you don't relieve. It's like you learn how to juggle, you learn how to prioritize, and then you learn resilience. I just heard this woman speak, and she was talking about how there's like this class of like elite athletes, like not really elite athletes, elite resilience athletes, but there are people who face adversity, they face challenges, and a small number of people like will really struggle to bounce back. Majority of people will bounce back eventually. But then there's like these anti-fragile or whatever the terminology, but these people who are like super resilient. So like not only do they bounce back, but they get stronger off of adversity or challenges. And I do think that those are skills that are worth building and thinking about for yourself as a leader, but also for the team. Not just how do you handle stuff as it comes up, but how do you have 25 million things coming at you, macro environment changing, everything kind of uncertain, and you're able to kind of manage and navigate through it, without it like breaking you. And I think it's like a muscle, right? Like it's going to the gym. Like I think you have to actively build that,
I'd like to tag on to the resilience comment, humor. You're on the board of an organization, Hilarity, for charity supporting Alzheimer's caregivers.
Yeah.
So humor is something that you also see as an area for helping with caregiving and problem solving. Talk about how humor plays in the role of leadership today.
I have the worst sense of humor, but like I surround myself with people who are really funny. So like if you have a bad sense of humor, you can still find humor. But yeah, Hilarity for Charity is so incredible. So organization founded by Seth Rogen and his wife, Lauren Rogen, comedian, who took care of Lauren's mom, who battled early onset Alzheimer's. And it's so true, especially through caregiving. It's like if you're not laughing, you're crying. So you find the levity, you find the humor. I remember in the darkest, hardest moments with my mom, just something silly and we just giggle. And it was like such a release to just, kind of be able to laugh and try to work through it together. So yeah, Hilarity for Charity does incredible work. They support Alzheimer's and dementia caregivers, provide respite grants so they can get a little reprieve. But the way they raise money is they host these incredible events where they bring in all these comedians. But they even have this thing called CareCon, which is like support groups where, again, they bring in comedians. And I was watching the videos from the recent CareCon that just happened a couple weeks ago. And I was like laughing and crying all in the same like moment. It's so, so good. So yeah, I think humor is huge and finding the moments of levity, especially when things get tough.
Good advice. Interesting. You said something about setting up a board.
Yeah.
So that's a thing. That's a
yeah.
work. That's a project.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about, okay, now you've got to get a board together.
Yeah.
Take people on that journey for a minute or two. I've got to find the right people. Mm-hmm. Like what went on there for you when you set up your board?
Yeah. So our board, we set it up, I guess, as we were doing our seed round, and we had, as part of our docs, we had to set up. I avoided it for as long as possible because I was like, I don't need another thing to manage.
Are you chairman of the board?
I technically think I am.
Okay,
but
so
yeah.
you're on the board for sure, and you're like kind of the leader of it, but you've got people around you. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, so the board was pretty easy. It was, a small board. My co-founder was on it at the time. We set it up to have our investors, and then there was one independent, and that was the big search, is finding the right fit for the independent role, and interviewed some amazing people. We knew we wanted to be a woman, and we have this amazing independent director, Alice Lim Kikeng, who's been on our board since the beginning of the board since probably like 2018.
Okay, so you've got a couple investors, each with one seat. Yourself and independent. Is it a 5-person board?
It's a 5-person board, yeah.
Right. So how do you Take us through the cadence of working with the board and what you get out of it. I want people to be able to take away, I'm going to start something. I probably am going to need a board just to help for more brain power and more to doing, and help us with that. Tell people about that.
Yeah, I think about the board engagement as being kind of, in part, there's the kind of like, the fiduciary duty of the board, and they have to do their kind of regulatory stuff or whatever. So there's like that stuff. And then there's kind of the other side of the board, which is, how do we activate these individuals who feel very invested in what we're doing to kind of leverage their networks or their skills or their, whatever it may be. And so, I like to put my board to work, basically. And so always thoughtful about how do we, are there a set of companies or employers that we're trying to get into, and can we give them a list of those employers, or asking them to get involved in making some talent intros, that sort of thing. But and I think they love that too. But we have an amazing board. We've had basically the same board for years now.
It's a good sign.
Yeah.
Jack?
Lindsay, I expect many in our audience are actually dealing with the reality of being caregivers, whether it's for an aging parent or young children. So are watching or listening to this from through the prism of their own lived experience right now.
Right.
Yeah.
What kind of advice can you give to them that they can put in place this week, this month, that can help them both navigate their continuing careers as well as the reality of their challenging home life?
Yeah. By the way, things have gotten hard for caregivers. For parents, childcare is now more expensive than rent in every market in the U.S. right now. So It's a major expense. And so, if you're a working family, you're making very critical trade-offs and decisions around care. One of the big trends we see is kind of multi-generational households. So more people living with parents, and that can sometimes work. Same thing on the parent side, aging parents. We have the largest aging population we've ever seen before in history.
Sure.
11,000 people turning 65 every day. That used to be 10,000 people. And same thing, care will take, most caregiving journeys, most older adults will be able to live longer, but with more complicated situations.
Oh, that's a good way to think about it. Yeah.
And so, lifespans have increased.
Right.
But the medical treatments we have and science and discovery is amazing, but the care people need will be prolonged. And then of course, care is very expensive. Medicare does not cover long-term care, which most people don't know. It doesn't cover an in-home aid or a long-term care facility. That's private pay or Medicaid. And so there's the financial decision there. And so, my advice to caregivers out there is, just reach out and get support. It's not on, I think there used to be a mentality that each family, it was on the family, it was on those parents or those adult children to kind of figure it out for themselves. And there just are tremendous resources and supports. We work mostly through employers. And so always encourage people to kind of look at the benefits and resources that their employer offers access to. If you come to us private pay, we're $400, $450 a month. If you go through your employer, it's free. Might as well use us. And so what people can do right now is think about where they can get some support to help solve some of their challenges, whatever those look like for their own caregiving situation.
That's great. Jack,
what about their mindset, Lindsay? What advice can you give to people? I know the common phrase is it's really on my mind.
Yeah.
And it's always on my mind. So do you have any tips or counsel for how to address the mindset issue and just how you think about it?
Yeah. I mean, I think the way that I've started to think about caregiving, and this has changed a lot for me, is just not striving for perfection. There's no world where I can be everywhere for all the people at all the time. This week, my daughter, she does this after school program, and they wrap up this week, and each day they have an after school performance at 4:00. And old me, I would have been at everyone and made sure I was, and I'm like, okay, I can go to today and I can go to tomorrow, Thursday skip, Friday skip. And so I think it's, not striving for perfection, allowing yourself to drop some balls, showing up when you think it matters the most, and giving yourself a lot of, grace and, permission to just not have to try to do it all.
Great advice. Jack, I think we're going to have to leave it there, but some great wisdom, I think. I'm glad we had Lindsay in this topic for listeners. Do you want to start with maybe some of the recaps? You're always you're really good at these.
First of all, Lindsay, it's so meaningful and so helpful, and the connecting the caregiving with the increasing need for leaders to also be caregivers in business, not just in their own
maybe lowercase c, but still
totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
And the growth. Look, Tim and I founded Lead Human on the basis of our mutual understanding that empathy will be increasingly important in leadership roles as technology and data and efficiency and profitability shift over the next several years. You talked about destigmatizing care and caregiving, recognizing as leaders in business in their own organizations and teams what's holding individuals back that's happening in their own lives, and how can leaders be more acknowledge, even if they don't know the details, that it's happening in all of our lives. And you kind of shifted the idea of work-life balance for me in this context. And how do you recognize as leaders that you're not only working with people in their professional capacity, but also helping understanding that they're navigating other realities, and to be aware of those, unlocking potential. We share the unleashing the human potential, and the human condition connected to the machine, and the connection of what you're doing with infrastructure, with method, with system, and humanizing it is really meaningful. Resilience versus relief, humor as a path, in CareCon and Hilarity for charity. So all of those things come together, Lindsay, and I think connect the dots in terms of why Tim and I were so interested and excited to have you as a guest on Lead Human, that what you do in your caregiving world is so truly connected to the need and role for leaders to recognize the importance of being a caregivers as well.
Right. I've got two other takeaways that I loved. One was you became an entrepreneur because you wanted to solve a problem.
Yeah.
I love that one. That was right at the beginning, right, Jack? And then at the end, you said, don't try to be perfect. I love those, the beginning and the end.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks again
for being here. What did we miss?
Did we miss anything?
No, I can't even remember the whole conversation. That was amazing. That was a perfect recap. And I think you both summarized it perfectly. I think this new world of being more human while AI and tech take over so many pieces is a whole new frontier. So excited to have you all illustrate it for us.
Awesome. Jack, I think it's time that we thank the audience for listening today, and say to everyone, if you learned anything today from Lindsay, and I'll bet you did, about leadership, about humans, really, please go ahead and share that, and help us on this journey now, certainly with Lindsay, to Lead Human. And I'm just going to say again what she just said, because it's in our tagline, and I'm going to look at Lindsay when I say it, because it's not about better managing the machine. It's about unleashing the human potential.
Love it.
And this has been Lead Human.
And I will add, Tim, if I may, we are partnered with the Acast Creative Network. Our Lead Human podcast is available at YouTube, available at all podcast platforms, and all of our content is available at lead-human.com.